All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Magic and Miracles. Today, I am here with Chris Wasko. And Chris, tell us about your magic and miracles story. Like, tell us the biggest magic and miracle that you have experienced in your life.
My biggest miracle was, I'll say, surviving a skiing accident, but I learned much later I didn't actually survive it. I jumped timelines.
So, what does that mean? What does that mean for you? What does it mean for people around you? Or tell us, walk us through what happened, and then later on tell us what it means to jump timelines.
Yeah, at the time, it would have seemed just normal. There wasn't anything in regards to what one would recognize as a near-death experience because I was completely unconscious. I was knocked unconscious. I was 15 at the time. What I understand more, what led up to it is I was living in a very volatile home. I was very unhappy. And I remember about 3 years before the accident, one time my dad had probably hit me the worst he had ever. And when he was done, he shut the door on me, left me in the dark. But the moon was very bright. And I recall staring out the window, looking at the moon, and just praying to no longer be here. And I realized later I essentially got my wish. When I had this accident, it's a miracle I survived. I fell off a 15-foot cliff. I crashed into a boulder. I I had really no recollection of the actual event. I kept coming in and out of consciousness, and I learned many years later that I didn't actually survive, that my soul chose what I understand to be a death door. I'm a theta healer, and in theta healing training, we walk into that education. And when I visited that for myself, I heard very clearly, you remember your death door when that chapter came up. And I was brought back to that and I said, oh my gosh, I took it. I just knew. I knew I walked through it. And then I had a lot more realizations come to me. And I recognized I needed it because the lessons I signed up for, I had learned to quite a degree. And the ones I wanted to continue learning with the timeline I was on, I was not going to get to that place. So, hence a death door when they're presented, and this is only presented on a soul level. Our soul chooses. We don't, as humans, choose. That's very different. Um, but it's more of, am I achieving the lessons I want to learn? And with the one I was on, no. And at least not going forward. And coming back, would I say that would I notice things are being different in ways? Sure, but in most ways, no, because life just got much harder. So if I already was at a place where I didn't want to live, I then got to a place where I would then ask, why did I survive this accident and wish it would have succeeded, I guess, in the no longer being here. It was a very difficult time, but over time is when I realized why it all needed to happen the way it did.
So walk us through that. What happened after your accident? Did you go back into to your dad? Or how did it become worse?
After my accident, like I remember being in the hospital in glimpses. I remember the pain. When they say you forget pain, that's not me. Uh, I, I've given birth 4 times. I'll do that again than to have that pain. I broke my back. I broke my pelvis. I had a massive concussion. I needed a blood transfusion, and it was just excruciating. And you know, then I had to just go on, right? I had to go into physical therapy. I had to, try and get back to school. And live a normal teenage life. And my parents were not only physically abusive, they're verbally abusive. So just that seemed to get worse. And at the time, I just blamed it on my teenage years of just, I was a difficult teenager. But I was really living with very abusive people because they were very broken. I was basically raised by very broken people that were healing in absolute no way and living from their wounds. So when you're living from your wounds, you're also parenting from your wounds. And then just a lot of things were happening. Just experienced so much loss. My great grandmother, whom I was named after, passed away. My dog passed away. I had two friends killed in a car accident. I just felt like, and things were all very condensed into a very short period of time for me. So dealing with my accident, dealing with my parents, dealing with loss on this massive level, I I don't even know how I got through emotionally, mentally, because if I had times where I was crying because I was sad, my dad would just yell at me, get off, get up and go out and live. People die all the time. There's nothing to be sad about. And, and I was bullied at school now. And that was probably the one thing that really stood out because I had always been someone that really fell into friendships very quickly. I essentially was told like, oh, you're in the popular kids club, but I just made friends easily. So, but now I was bullied, and that was definitely a sign something was very different. And I know my energy changed in so many different ways. I was depressed for sure. I would go to bed at like 7 o'clock at night because I just hoped that made the day go faster. And I'd wake up and do it all over again and feel like I barely slept.
So, when we think of you growing up in a very abusive home with both of your parents being super abusive, what on earth kept you going to heal your broken back and heal everything that was, let's call it fucked up from the accident? How on earth do you keep going? Is that your mind? Is it your soul? Is it the feeling of I want to survive in as for the human? Or what kept you going?
That is such a good question. And at times I don't know. But I would say my soul more than anything because I've always been a rather strong and resilient person. And I was an athlete, so the idea that I could get back to sports was also important to me. I didn't in the way I wanted to, and that made it harder because I grew up in a family that you had to be a good athlete, and if you were loved. So now I wasn't loved as much, and that was very clear. And there was definitely a direct correlation to my not playing sports to the same degree that I was. And it was also difficult because that meant I was home more. Sports was an escape for me. So now I had to be home and I had to live in this and hear the things. Uh, the, the physical abuse actually lessened incredibly after my accident. It was definitely more mental and emotional at that point, just being told, I've been told the worst things in my life by my own parents. When people think about, oh, we have to prepare you for the world, so you were prepared for the world. The world was great once I got out there. Like, oh, this is great. This is beautiful. No, I was raised in what you would describe as just not great on many levels, but it looked really pretty. My parents are wealthy, good-looking people and held up a front. They're extremely narcissistic. So I was labeled the problem, and everyone believed that story, myself included. I was miserable.
Mm. And so, what would you say is the difference between then a near-death experience and the timeline jumping? So walk us through that because as you said in your accident, you jumped timelines. So what does
Yes.
that mean? What is the difference to a near-death experience?
Near-death experience, you could stay on the same timeline. You don't necessarily jump, but you can. It really comes down to, what you want, what your soul wants and what your soul chooses. But near-death experiences, people literally experience it and they remember it. I didn't. I was led through it in hindsight because for me, when a big part of this journey for me, it was my awakening. And it came after I cut off my parents. And I didn't do this till I was well into my 30s. And cutting off my parents, while it was the most difficult decision I made in my life, it was so incredibly healing on many levels. But a big part of this healing is it awakened my gifts. I suddenly started seeing people in spirit. I was able to read energy, see energy, feel energy. And the reason why I wasn't able to do that before is because trauma muted all of my abilities. So for someone like me, it was very important that I came into this on my own. And if I had the knowledge of what near-death experiences often bring, and because so many people, when they have near-death experiences, it is the energy of an awakening. Something shifts, something changes. That would have changed my path too much to not allow for me to come into this the way I needed to,
I see.
and how frustrating that was to learn as a human. I recognize why I needed it as a soul, but for me, it was very important for my soul lesson that I was essentially ignorant to everything I'm able to do because that was a big part of my choosing to come back, that I knew I was going to come into it on a soul level, but it was going to be based on my healing.
Got it. Okay. And the moment you cut off your parents, walk us through that one.
It was an event. It wasn't the most dramatic event, but and it was progressive. When uh my dad hit my oldest child, who at the time was 2 years old, that was the time I should have cut them off. But I was still so, I guess, entrenched in that type of family system that I chose to forgive him and I chose to move on and move forward with a relationship. And it took another 8 years, and he threatened to hit my husband. And I said, that's it, I'm done, enough. And I stopped accepting phone calls. I stopped responding to everything. And I had two siblings that were one pretty much turned into my father, and the other turned into my mother. So when you live in these types of family systems, you either become it or you become the problem. Hence the identifying as a black sheep, but ultimately I see myself as a cycle breaker. But all I was doing at the time, it wasn't to focus on me and my healing, it was to protect my family. I needed to cut them off because I knew they were a threat to the safety of my children. And I should have done it sooner. I wasn't strong enough. And I'm still forgiving myself for that. The fact that my dad hit one of my children, I'm crushed by that. And I'm working through that as best I could and forgiving myself because I could have protected him from that. And while I understand and accept it as part of my journey, my only regret when it comes to cutting my parents off is not doing it sooner because it absolutely changed my life for the better. I'm so much more peaceful. I am so much more calm. I'm a better wife. I'm a better mother. I'm a better person on so many levels because when you're raised in toxicity, you're going to have elements of toxicity yourself. So I really needed to examine those elements in myself and get beyond that and not be a victim and just be the best version of me I could.
I love that for you. I loved how it turned out. And now walk us through some magic and miracles that have happened after you decided to cut off your parents and after you had your awakening.
So magical. It's so magical. I mean, ultimately, the biggest thing was calming my nervous system. And I learned in doing that, it's what connected me to spirit. Our nervous system is key in connecting to beyond. And what first started happening is I would just start seeing people in my mind's eye, which was shocking to me. While I recognize in hindsight some of my abilities that I was able to do because it was so muted by trauma, I just kind of chalked it up as a one-off or occasional thing. I would have called myself an intuitive empath. But now I was seeing people in spirit. I was dreaming of it. I mean, I was all encompassed in it. And I didn't know how to communicate with them because they don't have a body. They don't communicate like we do. So I started taking classes on psychic mediumship development and I just kept expanding. And I I could not believe it. If you would have told me I was going to be doing this work, I don't think I would have believed it myself. I have a business background. I was living a very different life. So, it's just been amazing. And because of I've been so open, I just keep seeing more and experiencing more. For example, this year I had an acupuncture appointment and while, just laying on the table with needles in me, I felt a dragon. And then I saw a dragon. And, and even at that moment, I've been doing this for years now. I even had that moment of cognitive dissonance of this can't be happening. This can't be happening. And after I spoke to the acupuncturist and I was like, how do you casually ask somebody, do they have a dragon? So I just asked her if she uses spirit animals in her work, and she said, not really. And I said, okay, I'm gonna just flat out ask. I was like, do you know you have a fire and ice dragon in your office? And she says, oh yeah, that's my dragon. As if we were just talking about, like, do you know your aunt's over there? And she's like, oh yeah, that's my aunt, and she's been here all day. It was, and it just flowed. And I described everything I saw with this dragon, and she validated everything. And I said, oh, okay, so I guess I see dragons now. She's like, yeah, did you see yours while you were in there? I was like, actually, I did. And she's like, did you see her color? And I said, yes, she's purple. She's like, yep, I saw purple too. I was like, I can't even believe I'm having this conversation right now. So it's constantly unfolding. So I keep saying, like, I continue to onboard with these things because one, I'm more open, two, I'm more calm, and ultimately I just have this element of surrender, of just really trusting what comes and trusting my journey and being at peace with it.
That is beautiful. I love that. And also for me, theta healing has been the most incredible when it comes to healing because also for me, when I had tuberculosis, I was having a remainder of a cough that I just couldn't get away, even with medicine. So eventually I did a theta healing session and it went away, which was magical for me. That was
I
one of
love
the
that.
magic moments. So,
Yeah.
what have you done with theta healing for yourself or for your family or for your clients that you would describe as something absolutely magical or miraculous?
Well, I feel like theta healing for me, because I don't use it in the way that, I trained for it. So I don't even necessarily do like theta healing sessions in that way, but I use it in my work because it allowed me to see in the body. But I do it a little differently than how theta works, because theta essentially teaches us to do this almost in a medical way, like mix the medical and the spiritual. What I do is I climb into the seven main chakras. So I will go in and I will explore the chakras from the root down, up to the crown in my clients and read their energy because I'm reading them and what their body is telling me about them. So I'll find the traumas, I'll find, who it's related to, what it's related to, and how it's affected their system because I'm very much like to empower people to heal. I don't want people to feel they have to come to me in the sense of I am your healer. It's I am going to point you in the direction to help you heal yourself. So here's what's going on in your body and here are tools that are going to help you. So theta is probably a little more in that, I'm going to be your healer and I'm going to relieve you of all of these things. And while I feel that's very powerful, and I think that's great for people to do it, I just did not feel aligned to that. I love empowering people, and that probably makes them need me a little less, but I feel that means I'm doing my job. If you come to me and then one day you don't feel you need me anymore, then I've done my job. And that's a really good feeling. And I love seeing people empowered and feeling like their life has changed for the better. And really, it's because they made the choice. Yes, I'm a part of it, but I always say, I'm honored to be but a blip on your screen and to just be part of your journey and know that we're joined for a reason. We're brought together to people for amazing reasons. And most people that find me have had either narcissistic abuse or some form of childhood trauma. So I like knowing that I can help through that because I lived it, I experienced it. and hence my timeline jump. I was meant to help people that have experienced very similar circumstances. And it's an honor to do that because I you can only know that pain if you've lived it. And there's something about when we're on a healing journey to feel validated by our experiences. And I love that I'm able to do that for people.
So give us some specific examples that people have experienced and that you have experienced with them and through them and what how it has helped them.
So I will, when I climb into chakras, I kind of explore. So I'm not looking for something in particular, but I'm looking, like, as an example, if I go into a sacral chakra is, we use the element of water in that. So I am looking when I'm in that chakra, how does the water element look in there? How's the color? Because chakras always have color. So if it's dull, then there's something affecting it. If the water is very abundant, there's probably a little too much of something. If the water is stagnant, then something happened to make that still and calm. So I look for those. And then sometimes I just find amazing things. Like one time was in someone's root chakra and I couldn't find how they were rooted because how somebody is rooted and how that's revealed says a lot about the person. So this person had vines. And when we think of vines, think of like ivy that climbs up a lot. It climbs everywhere, but I was seeing a lot of upward movement, but I didn't feel that this person wasn't grounded. So I'm asking the energy. I was like, why is this so viney and why is this not deeply grounded? And then I felt the Fae. And I was like, oh my gosh, this person's tied to the Fae. So I told her, I was like, you've got Fae energy in your root chakra. And she's like, that's great. What is that? I said, yeah, are you familiar with like fairies and gnomes? And she's like, oh yeah. She's like, but what does that mean? I said, for you, because not everyone can take that. Like, this is so much, she didn't even know what the Fae was when I said it. And I said, this tells me you are very good with plant life. That I said, you could practically live in a garden and that you're very good at healing plant life and that you're very connected to it. And she's like, I do practically live in my garden. That's amazing. How could you know that? So things like that are just so incredible to me because I didn't feel this person's good with garden work right out of the gate. I felt Fey energy. I felt that she's literally working with elementals and doesn't know it. So those are pretty incredible things. So I like when I could find the good because I work so much with trauma. I don't always like to look for that stuff that's hurt us. I like to find those beautiful things that make us amazing. I do see a lot of the trauma. If a chakra is blocked, it'll be completely dark. Uh, so if first cannot see it, because I basically, when I go into energy, I ask permission to come in. So if it's completely dark, that means it's blocked. At least that's how it reveals itself to me. So I will bring in, elements that I can to help it open to the best of the degree to do that kind of session. And usually it's receptive to some sort of like energy healing to allow for that. But that often means that that chakra for them needs support, needs work. So I'm always making notes as I'm doing this session because I want to give them those exercises. So a block chakra tells me it really needed to protect itself, and it probably took a hit pretty hard. When it comes to someone that's dealt with narcissistic abuse, I see this most often in the solar plexus. So it'll either be blocked or it'll be so open that it's leaking energy. And that is why they're so drained all the time, and that the narcissist in their life is pulling from their energy. So at first, I won't necessarily feel there's a narcissist in their life. I will see and feel their solar plexus chakra and that it's so open and leaking. I'm like, there has to be a narcissist nearby. That I just know based on what the chakra is telling me. The throat chakra is also a common one because if it's not even blocked, it'll show elements of damage. It'll show that their voice has been either stifled or that they were criticized for speaking. And I'm always careful to say things like, I don't have medical experience and I'm not qualified to diagnose. I said, but this could lead to a thyroid condition because I've seen it enough at this point that when a throat chakra looks in that manner, that you're walking the lines of a thyroid condition. I know that from personal experience. I used to have an autoimmune thyroid condition that I have since healed through my journey. And yet another one of my own miracles because I was told I needed to be on medication my entire life. And I said, no, I will find a way. And I did.
How did that happen? Because that's really another miracle. I was just going to ask, how's your body now? And yeah, tell us more about how you have felt that because I know so many people with a thyroid condition, or also, like you said, where it could
So
lead to
many.
that. So, how have you healed that?
Yeah, my thyroid condition absolutely related to the fact that I was criticized for my voice because I would speak up to my parents quite a bit, and I was punished severely for it and criticized. So when that came on board, I mean, first it wasn't very diagnosable, because and a lot of people experience this too. They'll get their thyroid levels checked and everything comes back normal. And you just know something's not right. And I walked probably that path for a good 5 years before somebody was able to give me something to work with. That I had an autoimmune disease and that it was Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and that I would need to support it for my entire life. And this was even more of a holistic doctor that basically said I would need a supplement, not necessarily a pharmaceutical. And I said, I will accept it for now because I know it will support me, but this is not for life. So that is one of the biggest things in healing. You make that choice. I choose to heal because you take your power. And also, it's like a blind acceptance too, because I can say every time I've done that, I've had absolutely no idea how I'm going to do it. I just know that I will. And it's been incredibly empowering for me on my journey. And I trust the answers to come to me as they're meant to. It doesn't mean I just sit and wait. I was studying, I was exploring. Eventually, I stumbled upon medical medium information, and I bought his first book, and everything in it resonated with me. And then shortly after, I had purchased his thyroid healing book. And I chose to go on the thyroid healing protocol, which is a 3-month protocol in that book. And I healed my thyroid, and I essentially adopted that protocol where I no longer was eating, drinking things that weren't supporting my body. And this was also happening after I cut my parents off. So I was essentially healing my mind and I was healing my body. And then it opened me up to spirit. So that was just such an important element to it, that I was in this place of healing on every level. And but like I said, that first element is not accepting a diagnosis. You can use it, but use it as a tool. Don't accept it as a life sentence. We don't have to do that. We have that choice. That's the beauty of being human and having free will. We can accept it, and it can be hard. I know, because we have all the symptoms telling us we are sick, but don't live from it. Don't accept it. Say, I am healing every day. I am healing. And it's not to say you're sick. It's just to say I am healing and my body is figuring it out and I'm finding the answers. And so now my body feels pretty amazing. I don't do the medical medium protocols as strictly as I used to. And that's just been a personal choice. I really also love Ayurvedic healing. So if anyone's familiar with like the Ayurveda and the doshas, especially as a woman, as we get older and our hormones are changing, when our doshas are balanced, it helps balance us on a hormonal level and more naturally. And I really love that. So I kind of do this balance of like medical medium protocols as well as Ayurveda, because I was guided to it also. And at first I was a little resistant. Like, I don't know if I want to do this because medical mediums work for me. But I was like, no, it's okay. Trust the journey and you can always go back. So but it has been this element of a miracle. I love feeling this vibrancy of health that I mean, I'm healthier now than I was in my 30s. And that was a time when I felt like I should have been really healthy, but I was sick. I was. While I wasn't saying that regularly, I was definitely not in a state of health. And that makes me sad because it was at a time when, I was pregnant and I was birthing children and I feel like I could have done better for them during pregnancies and stuff. I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time, but I feel so much more knowledgeable now. It would have been nice to have gifted that to them.
And what you said is really a common thread that I see with people on this podcast, which is you have to decide to heal. You have to accept this. This is your way. You do not have to accept anyone else's diagnosis, anyone else's thinking, anyone else's death sentence. Sometimes what doctors say, like, well, you just have 6 months to live. That's some fucking bullshit. Like
Yes.
when you decide, this is what everyone says on this podcast, and I really want to stress that when you decide to heal yourself and go onto that path may be longer, maybe more complicated. It may throw you back sometimes, but at the end of the day, if you decided, you can really make that happen. And so thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing your journey with that. And so now I want to ask you if you could talk to the listeners of this podcast about how to call in more magic and miracles into their lives, what would you say?
I would say get connected to that heart center because when you're connected to your heart center, I like to look at it this way. We have three different brains. We have the brain in our head, we have the brain in our heart, and we have the brain in our gut. And when we are living from the brain in our head, while wonderful, it gets us to this place of overthinking. But when we are at the brain in our hearts, we're feeling and the brain in our gut helps us trust. So, really connecting to those lower brains of the body gets you to those place of miracles because you're not thinking about it because our thinking often limits us. We often put those limitations in the way of that, well, this could happen and what if that happens and maybe I shouldn't and maybe this. You don't think that way when you are thinking from your heart space or your gut space. You are just doing and you're trusting. And that is such a beautiful embodiment to embrace, welcome, and allow miracles in every way.
What are the daily practices that you can recommend so that people can do that?
Breathing. It sounds so simple, but so many of us we don't fully breathe in terms of the deep breaths. We do these short, heightened shoulder breaths. They're stress breaths. If you have tension in your shoulders or the back of your neck, you probably are a stress breather. So, really breathing to fill your lungs. And you don't necessarily have to go as deep into breath work. You could. Some people don't feel aligned to that. But when you're really breathing, the breath keeps us in the present moment because our thinking either puts us in the past or the future. The breath makes you very aware and conscious of the present. So you're breathing, and that's why I say you connect to that heart space. You hold your heart center and you take those deep breaths and you put yourself in that space. And that's where your decisions should come from. That's where your actions should come from because it's going to come from the purest place in you.
I love that. And I can add to that that there's a point when you actually put one finger between your eyebrows and one finger on your belly button that connects energy centers and that you can breathe so much deeper. And I love that exercise. I just started it recently. And so I just want to share that as well. It's a beautiful way to do
Yes.
it. And what I always say to people is bring your or focus all your attention and awareness, place it into your heart, focus on your heart, all of that. And then you can really access the magic that is within you and inside of you. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And so now tell us where our audience can find you.
The easiest way to find me is my website, which is my name, chriswasko.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming onto this podcast. Thank you for your time and your energy and for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.